When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Hello everybody, my name is Jose Pro, Man-Made Survival. Thanks so much for coming back to the channel and watching this video. I greatly appreciate it because I want to share this information with you because this information is really important because we can possibly go to war with China, right? And we know that China and Russia are friends, so more than likely Russia will be involved in it. And we know that for a very long time, China and Russia, especially Russia, they've been wanting to destroy the United States. All right, and because we have very powerful deterrence, is the only reason why Russia has not taken the step yet to destroy the United States. So the same thing with China. So we're going to talk about that today. All right. So before I go any further, I want to remind the Man-Made Survival family in this community, also all the other preppers, that I have raised the level of crisis to red. In the 4 levels in a crisis to red, and red reads: bug out, everyone in place in their bug out bugging location, full self-sustained infrastructure running, and 24-hour perimeter check. All right, you want to go ahead and have that in place and go ahead and have it ready, because if disaster strikes, all right, with a nuclear war, we may not, especially right now with the whole coronavirus thing going on, we may not be able to prepare any more than what we currently are. All right, so think about that. The coronavirus pretty much dragged on for a couple months before it came to the United States, right? And then when it suddenly hit here, there was the panic buying, people freaking out, the store shelves empty, and they remain empty. Now we have food shortages because of the plants shutting down, you know, the food processing plants shutting down, farmers getting rid of their milk, getting rid of their produce because they can't sell it. So right now we have a big mess in our hands, and right now our enemies could take advantage of that. All right, so today we're talking about Russia, and now, China. I keep saying Russia, but I mean China, because the rhetoric here in the United States has increased so much against China, saying pretty much everything is pointing out that we are going to war against China. All right, China is probably already prepared for it or getting prepared for it. So is Russia, and the United States may be doing the same thing as we speak if they're not already ready for it. All right, so I want to start this podcast with this video. And before I show the video, I do want to say that this may end up being a 2, maybe 3-part series. So I encourage you to watch these all the way to the end for all the information that's in it. Not just this video, but the following videos. And also, what I'm going to do after this series, I'm going to do the podcast on the weapon systems that China and Russia have that they can use against the United States, compared to what we got that we have to defend, ourselves with. So let's get started with this video. Here it is.
NATO is set to formally recognize for the first time the challenges posed by China. The alliance's Secretary General says the change is not meant to create an adversary, but to better understand and respond to China's growing power.
And for the latest, we're joined by Natalie Powell in London. Natalie, why the focus so much on China?
Of course, with China's expansion globally, it's also true in the context of defense and its defense spending. Back in 2018, NATO estimates that China had the 2nd largest global defense spending. And we know, of course, that in March, China increased that spending further. It's believed to be of the sum of $177 billion currently. Now, it's still far behind the US's defense spending, but there are concerns, particularly with tensions arising between China and, of course, one of the NATO allies, the US, with trade concerns there, that perhaps there could be issues there. And NATO has been reviewing China's defense spending. Now, it hasn't gone as far as to suggest that what it will do is set up a NATO-China Council, as it has done with Russia, of course, but clearly China very much in NATO's sights, with them wanting to keep an eye, essentially, on China's defense spending.
All right, so now NATO, is focusing on China, even though the purpose of NATO pretty much all the way in the beginning was to, fight against Russia, pretty much. It's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I believe that's the acronym. But anyways, the point is that now they're shifting their focus from Russia to China. All right. And the reason I showed this at the beginning is because now we see that months back, they have been preparing for this. At least the United States and NATO are preparing for this, because if you ever notice in the past, every time we had a problem with Russia, NATO was involved. So it looks like now, every time we have a problem with China, NATO will be involved. All right. So with the whole coronavirus, everybody's starting to say, right, that it could possibly have come from a lab, and that China kept their mouth shut, didn't say anything to anybody, and they let it spread throughout the world. This is the trend that's going on right now, right? And even though the mainstream media said that whoever shared that the virus came out of a lab in Wuhan was spreading conspiracy theories, and now the United States intelligence agencies, they're looking into the matter to see if it actually did. So obviously, if let's say it did come out to be, which 99% of us in the alternative media believe that it came from there, from a Wuhan lab, is now they're looking into it and see if it's true. So it carries enough weight for the United States intelligence agencies to go look into the matter. All right. So here's this report, and this one is from abcnews.go.com. Intelligence report warned of coronavirus crisis as early as November, source says. As far back as late November, U.S. intelligence officials were warning that a contagion was sweeping through China's Wuhan region, changing the patterns of life and business and posing a threat to the population, according to 4 sources briefed on the secret report. All right, so now they're coming out and say that they told people, in the highest levels of government, that this was going on. And why wouldn't take action before then? I have no idea. Maybe they didn't think it was credible enough. Maybe that whole line of "it's just the flu," they believed it themselves, right? All the way to the end, until they couldn't anymore. So now that creates a problem. But out of all of this, okay, this next headline came to be exclusive. As Washington, D.C. faces coronavirus spike, secret military task force prepares to secure the Capitol. This from Newsweek.com. A little-known military task force charged with evacuating Washington has already been activated. As task force charged with the most sensitive government mission of securing Washington in the face of attackers, foreign and domestic, and if necessary, moving the White House and other key government offices to alternate locations. Activated on March 16, Joint Task Force National Capital Region is chartered to defend Washington on land, in the air, and even in its waterfronts. The Special Task Force, the only one of its kind in the country. All right, so they're saying in this report that it's because of the spike in coronavirus. In the previous video to this one, I share how the possibility that they had activated or assembled this task force was for the possibility that the United States may very well have some type of civil unrest or maybe a civil war against our own, its own citizens, because of the economic collapse, because of the food shortages, because of the lockdowns, whatever. But also it could be because of China's involvement in all of this. All right. So if it is deemed that China in fact did release this virus on purpose as some type of attack against the United States, then they would have everything they need to justify a war against China. Not just the United States, but NATO as well. All right. So here in the comment section, somebody was telling me that they saw military equipment being moved around. and I'm gonna be showing the or I'm gonna be reading what was said, but I'm also going to show it on the screen. All right, so here's what it says. Be advised, last night, Saturday, 18 April 2020, my 22-year-old daughter and I were standing outside at about 2100 p.m. and noticed 70 plus unidentified aircrafts, military, moving southwest to northeast about 8 miles north of I-90 in South Minnesota. Stay alert. I said, thank you for the intel. Had any local news reported anything on it? Wonder if it has anything to do with the military locking down Washington, D.C. He replied, no, sir, I just looked into it, and none of the local affiliates had mentioned it. Jose, however, several YouTube channels, including Mark Fugel, mentioned last night that they heard some officials were being moved to secure locations. I've heard nothing further about it. I said, thank you. I'll look into it. Hopefully I can find something about it. All right. I have not been able to. I have not been successful. And I want to thank Hans Hammond for that information, because all of this is very important. So let's say that Washington is in fact getting ready to go to war. All right. They're going to go ahead and move everything they need out of the way and, strategically position everything they need in order to counterattack or give the first strike, because we know that NATO has moved, or they want to become a first strike kind of offensive for NATO, for everything that they've said. So anyways, here's the next headline that I have. And this is where we start seeing that they're getting ready, or the United States is getting ready for war, because the way that everybody's talking around, in places that matter, because it doesn't matter what you and I think about it. It matters the people who are holding the nuclear buttons and, that are giving orders to the war machine to go out there and do what they do. So if they think it's real, or they think that they need to mobilize, then we have to pay attention. Doesn't matter what we think. All right, here's the headline. These are acts of war. Economist claims China covered up its early coronavirus outbreak and preempted global crisis by inserting a pandemic clause in trade deal with the United States. This is from Jack Elson for Mail Online. It goes on to say, China committed an act of war by covering up the scale of its early coronavirus outbreak for 6 weeks, a leading economist has claimed. Danielle DiMartino Booth, an author and chief executive, said Beijing officials were aware of the deadly disease spreading in Wuhan last November and allowed it to snowball into a global pandemic. She said Chinese officials had countless lives in their hands and should be hauled before an international court, as their underreporting did not afford the rest of the world time to enforce border restrictions. Quote, to me, these are equivalents to acts of war. All right. So those are very strong words. All right. So if the United States or whoever was trying to take China out there to be being seen by an international court, and there would be war. I'm pretty sure they would rather die than go to prison, especially at the hands of the international West. But anyways, here's the next headline. China has American blood on its hands. Senators deem China paid the price as U.S. intelligence investigates if Wuhan lab could be the real source of coronavirus. This from Daily Mail. So the point I want to make is that on some occasions, if you wait for the mainstream media to give you the real reporting, then you're behind, So this is why it's important for you to listen to voices like mine and others out there who are giving you real evidence, real truth, about things that are going on. Because remember, like I stated in the beginning of the video, they said that if you said that it came from a lab in Wuhan, you were a conspiracy theorist. It came from a bat that was undercooked, and this is why we have this problem now. And now everybody's moving to, oh snap, maybe it was from a lab. So and they're by this point they're already months behind. So anyways, I'm gonna show you a video of Steve Bannon saying that China has blood in their hands. Here it is.
Addressed. I mean, Steve, you and I talked on Sunday about the fact that they cornered the market for protective equipment in January while they were downplaying the coronavirus. They actually acquired 2.02 billion masks, 25 million pieces of protective clothing. They already make half of the capacity of all masks in the world. Why did they need to buy another 2 billion in January while they were playing down the coronavirus?
Not just playing in, they were lying to people about the human-to-human transmission. They knew they had it. They vacuumed up all the PPE, protective equipment, in Europe, the United States, and Brazil. So later on, they could use it as a strategic advantage to give back to countries to kind of bleed it out like they did with Governor Cuomo. It's unacceptable. This will be proven, and this shows you it's premeditated murder of those doctors and nurses from Italy to South Africa to the United States that died in service to their fellow citizens in their country. The blood is on the hands of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, here's what the president said last night to Sean Hannity about the World Health Organization. I want to get your take. Watch.
Every step that they made, everything that they said was wrong, and always in favor of China. Keep it open. Don't close the borders. There were other things, too, where it came from, the extent of it, how serious it was. They never viewed it as that serious.
Look what happened to the people in Wuhan because they lied to everybody about the human-to-human transmission. Look, in Geneva, they're trying to control or do control all of these UN operations. That's what President Trump's absolutely correct to expose this and go after it and make sure that it's taken care of. However, we can't take our eye off the ball. Remember, one of the most powerful things President Trump did was stop flights from China to come into the United States in late January. At that time, the Chinese Communist Party had limited, they had locked down internally Hubei province, but you could still fly from China to everywhere in the world, including Italy and Spain. The Chinese Communist Party knew about human-to-human transmission in December. All of this could have been stopped. The city of Wuhan and the decent, hardworking Chinese citizens did not have to be destroyed. Hubei province did not have to be destroyed. Italy, Spain, South Africa, the United States. All of this is at the doorsteps of the Chinese Communist Party. They are the Chinese people are the biggest victims. This is a murderous group of gangsters, and they've got to be held accountable by the world.
All right, so like I said, those are very strong words, right? Because if they have to convince the American people that we need to go to war with Russia because they did this to us, then they're gonna use everything at their disposal. And using those kind of words, in primetime TV, it's gonna do the job. So here's the next headline. Trump waits legal action against China over PPE, which is personal protective equipment, hoarding as international mask wars heat up. This from Hedge. The Trump administration is considering legal action against China after leading U.S. manufacturers of medical safety gear say Beijing has prohibited them from exporting goods in what the New York Post says was a bid to, quote, corner the market, end quote, in personal protective equipment. Quote, in criminal law, compare this to the levels that we have for murder, end quote, say Trump Real Day campaign senior legal advisor Jenna Ellis, who says that legal options include filing a complaint with the European Court of Human Rights or working through the United Nations, end quote. Quote, people are dying. When you have intentional, cold-blooded, premeditated action like you have with China, this would be considered first-degree murder, end quote, she added. All right, so it's person after person in levels that matter, that can whisper to other people's ears saying that China is responsible and that they need to pay. Even Trump came out and say that if China did it deliberately, that there would be a price to pay. All right. So if they did an act of war, then we're gonna have to respond the same way. That's exactly how it's gonna go down. So I want to point out the same thing that I did when all this was going on in China first, all the way back in January. I said, they're telling us one story, but they're acting differently. their actions are speaking louder than the words they're telling us. Because if the coronavirus at first was not a big deal, they wouldn't have been taking the measures they took, you know. So this is something similar that we have to pay attention to, because if we go to war with China, it can be a very bad war. And let's not forget, okay, what the United States did here in the past few weeks, because, you know, we had the problem with the aircraft carriers having problems with infected people. So we did this in Guam. Here's the headline. Elephant Walk on Guam serves as timely U.S. air power demonstration, defense experts say. With the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt sidelined nearby due to the novel coronavirus outbreak, the U.S. military on Guam exhibited a reminder of its deep bench this week in a region where global powers compete. 14 aircraft parade in a formation known as Elephant Walk along the runway at Anderson Air Force Base on Monday. Among them were 5 B-52 Stratofortress strategic bombers, 6 KC-135 Stratotanker aerofuelers, an MH-60S Nighthawk helicopter, and 2 unmanned aerial vehicles, an Air Force RQ-4 Global Hawk and a Navy MQ-4C Triton. All right, so the United States did this to show that we are not weak. All right, that because we have now, it's about 4 or 5 aircraft carrier, which is a lot. You know, that's half our fleet of Navy, you know, being sidelined right now because of the coronavirus and everything that we're doing to make sure that they're okay. The Joint Chiefs of Staff came out and said this: hit by virus, Pentagon warns enemies, don't test us. With an aircraft carrier forced into port and staff and base handling nuclear missiles hit by COVID-19, the U.S. military wants rivals to understand, don't test us. We have not been weakened. A statement after statement from the Pentagon has sought to deliver the message amid questions this week over whether the U.S. fighting force can maintain full readiness with cases among service members now at 2031. Quote, we're still capable and we're still ready no matter what the threat, end quote. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Mark Milley said Thursday. Quote, I wouldn't want any mixed messages going out there to any adversary that they can take advantage of an opportunity, if you will, at a time of crisis, he added. Quote, that would be a terrible and tragic mistake if you thought that, end quote. You know, and of course, we're still ready. The United States is still looking out. And like I said at the beginning of the video, with the secret military task force now in operation, you know, they are looking out for anything that may happen, whether here in the United States with the protesters that might escalate, or with China or Russia or any other force out there that thinks that we're weak enough to be able to be attacked. So all of this is very dangerous right now because Russia and China are watching how weak we become, you know, and how politically divided we are, and how we're on the verge of protests that could turn into civil unrest, or it maybe even civil war. It may go that far, I don't know, you know, or at least have food riots because of everything that's going on. So I'm gonna end this video right here because it's already gone over 20 minutes. So the next video, we're gonna talk about how China has presence all over the globe, and how they could possibly attack us, and not just China but also Russia. So I'll see you in the next video, and remember, always ready.
The Man-Made Survival Show.